A lot of times managers and leaders want to feel like their people can count on them. And that's a great thought and a great passion. But are you really count onable? We're going to talk about that today. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. As the tagline said, we're going to talk about being count onable, if that's a word. Well, I think it is a word. My guest actually titled his latest book that. His name is Jeff Cohen. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, Doug, thanks so much. It's so awesome to be here, and I'm excited to finally be sitting down and having this conversation with you. So thanks for having me.
Likewise, there is a little bit of a backstory. Jeff and I have been trying to put this together for a while, and I was the guy that was guilty of having to bounce the calendar a little bit. So I will publicly say thank you, Jeff, for being patient and hanging in there with me. It is going to be fun. This guy's got quite a track record and quite a background and just a lot of fun and interesting factoids along the way, which we'll get into. But Jeff, I'm going to let you, why don't you just kind of give everybody the rundown? How did you get to where you are right now? And how is it that you're spreading the messages you use now?
So there I was, sitting at home with these envelopes showing up at the door. And as I opened each one, there were 20 stickers, and there were 10 stickers, and there were 30 stickers. And they all came from professional sports teams. And all I really wanted was one. But I had this enormous stack of stickers start showing up. What you want to know is, like, I was the 8-year-old that just said, well, I'm going to write letters to the teams and see if they'll send me something. And oh my gosh, did they send me? Like, they sent me enough for the whole neighborhood. So, I was 8, and I said to my mom, I said, Mom, come in my room for a minute. So she did. And I said, that wall, I want to put all the stickers right on that wall. Won't that look awesome? And she looked at me straight-faced and just said, no. So
what are moms for, right?
Right, about the fastest no I've ever gotten in my life from my mom, and it was great. So I didn't dare ask her if I could put them on the car. But in any case, I put them on my notebook, and I went to school, and suddenly my friends wanted stickers. They're like, oh, those are cool. Can I buy one? I'm like, buy? I started hearing the dollar signs go cha-ching, cha-ching. So I sold a whole bunch of stickers. I made $50, and my dad says, Jeff, you're an entrepreneur. And I've been living it ever since. And in my adult life, I've started 6 companies. I grew a technology company from 0 to 50 people and 8 figures in about 2.5 years. We had an amazing run until 2007, when the financial crisis hit. And all of our customers were companies like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, State of California, Kaiser Permanente, Lockheed Martin. Like, those were our accounts. And all at once, they all came to us and they said, we love you guys. You're amazing. You're fired.
Yep.
And so it basically had me be in a position where, like, there was no way to resurrect the business. And I had a huge problem on my hands. And, the stuff I went through, which, by the way, in the book, it's all there. Like, all of the things I failed at in my life, even a chapter that says, hey, why am I telling you about all these failures I've had? And, I want you guys just to get, like, I'm the guy that realized that I could tell you all about my successes, but I've had way more failures, and they're so much more interesting because I actually learned something. And I was able to share that with other people. And I've helped other people through difficult times, because when you experience something and you've been in survival mode and you can't sleep and you can't make payroll and you don't know what's coming next, you know, it really makes a difference to have someone there with you and not on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Well, I can sure relate to that 2007, 2008. Some of my listeners have heard me talk about it. The last, I'll call it big company that I owned was also on a roll. We were into our 5th year of existence. And, you know, if you read the data, if you're a small business, if you make it past 3, you've probably got something and you got a chance. And we were rocking along, but we too were related to the financial services industry. And I had 200 clients, similar to what sounded like you had, all financial institutions. And within 45 days, they had lost 75% of their business, which meant I lost 75% of my business. And I've told this story before. Just to keep it short, I had 4 other private investors in the business with me, and First, I called all the CEOs of the 200 client companies we were serving. I said, "What are you guys doing?" And it wasn't good for anybody. And put all that together, called my 4 investors, and I said, "Guys, here's the deal. I'm not writing any more checks for this, and I don't expect you to write any more. But if the 5 of us don't write checks, this company's not going to exist tomorrow." And we all agreed to have a nice, friendly unwinding and shut it down, walked away. It was just a smoldering trash heap when it was over.
Listen, Doug, it sucks. And sometimes you're not set up. Like, we had been investing in going from being a services organization to a software company, but it didn't matter. And, you know, the fact is I went through some stuff there. Now, you can probably attest to this, and I know you had investors, and, you know, for me, I had my 2 partners. One of them had put some money in the company, but I was really the one left holding the bag. And I did that to myself because I said, I owe it to everyone to be the last man standing. And the reality is everybody else wanted to help. But if you don't ask people, you can't hear them say, yes, let me see what I can do. Let me make some phone calls. Let me whatever. And that's kind of, you know, how I got like a real schooling in pain. But, you know, then I got really, really lucky because, you know, even though I pushed everybody in my life away from me, I had this one friend that just wouldn't go. And he came over one day, and we were making these granola bars, and they were really tasty, and my family liked them. It was, in fact, the only thing I can remember at the time that was going well was that I made granola bars every Sunday, and my kids liked them. Even my ex-wife liked them, you know. And my friend said, hey, can I take some of these to work? And I gave him a bunch. And then he calls me up the next day. He says, Jeff, you got to come down here. I'm like, why? He goes, well, they want to buy them from you. I'm like, really? So I said, okay. Like, just like no enthusiasm, just okay. I went down there the next day. I met the people, and it was an experience because I was on the Warner Brothers lot, and I started selling energy bars to 20 TV shows and movies. And, you know, before I knew it, I had another business that I wasn't really interested in having, but that's what happened. And I call it the granola bar that saved my life because I was really, really depressed, like in front of Star Trek for 8 hours a day, depressed, like not talking to my wife and kids, depressed. And I didn't recognize it. And people, you know, we look at mental health issues a lot differently today than we did back then. And I surely needed some kind of support, and I just wasn't in a place to figure it out. But I started recovering with this company and making a few dollars. It wasn't much. And I got on Shark Tank with it. And We had a good run, but I realized that, the food business wasn't for me. And I went back to work at IBM, had an amazing boss. And it was there I started noticing, there are things I love doing, but being a sales rep, even though I was working with like Kaiser and Intel and Cisco, all the big accounts I loved working with, and that I had history with, even with that, it wasn't CEO. And, one of the things we do a really lousy job of today as business owners and CEOs is identifying when that moment exists in an employee, where they go from being your star employee to being your biggest disappointment, because that's what happens. And in 2013, I took a program called the Team Management and Leadership Program. And it was an amazing opportunity for me now to do an evaluation of myself. I mean, I'd been divorced for a year at that point, and my kids weren't talking to me, and my integrity was way out with everyone I was doing stuff with from the past, because when you shut a business down, it's really hard to make people whole. Just wasn't possible. And I still feel bad about that today. And I just started noticing that I was a shitty boss. I was arrogant. I was cocky. I was punitive. And I wasn't straight with people. Like, I would say one thing and then behind their back go and do something different, because I was just a crappy leader. I would say I wasn't a leader. I was really just a boss back then. And so we went on this journey with all these executives and business owners and entrepreneurs. It was an amazing journey. For a year, we met in small groups, like 7 and 8 people, and we got down to the one question that really mattered. And by the way, then we figured the answer out. Like, it was mind-blowing. So the question is, what is the one thing that impacts your business, both positively and negatively, more than anything else?
It's a good question. It's a great question.
And then the answer, I know everybody wants the answer, right? It's really simple, guys. It's effective communication. We all have a different definition of effective communication. And that definition, that one definition, governs trust and alignment in your organization.
Yeah.
And until there's one that actually works, you're going to be trying to figure that out, and you're going to churn through people, especially during this period of great resignation we're in, wondering, how do I shift that? What can I do? And I figured it out. So I worked with 300 companies, and I came up with this process called Countownable. And I wrote a book about it. It gives you the step-by-step instructions. So if you want, you can take this process I'm patenting and look at implementing it yourself, because it's all in the book. It's open source. And you can just take bits and pieces, or you could go all the way. But it's the way to move away from this punitive, negative accountability focus that companies have today. Because there is nothing positive about being accountable in any of our employees' minds.
And that's a big word that I run into with a lot of my clients. Everybody wants to know, how do I create accountability and how do I manage accountability? And we end up talking about the idea that if you've created a job for somebody, there is a fair expectation that they need to be producing something in that role. And, that's a reasonable, it's part of our capitalistic society. I mean, it's the exchange idea. but the question is, where and how do you set those expectations? How do you communicate them, to your point? And how do you create that clarity? And one thing I talk to people regularly about, and this is a mind shift for me that's evolved over the decades as a leader and owner of companies and manager of teams. I used to have my own skepticism about my employees, and I'm sure it showed, and I'm sure it ended up creating bad days at work working for Doug. But I've evolved this, and here's my thesis now. If you do a reasonably good job of picking your team, I know that's a big if, but if you do it, those people are going to show up with a willingness to do the right thing. Fundamental. It's going to be very fundamental. They're generally willing to do the right thing. So you, as the leader, you have to show them and tell them what the right thing is. You have to communicate that. You have to lay it out there and let them know. And if you ever allow the clarity to go away or the confusion to enter in, those people are not necessarily going to do the wrong thing. They're just not going to do anything because they're afraid of doing the wrong thing.
Well, that goes back to the concept of having a punitive environment. I mean, the issue with the word accountable is not the word, it's what it stands for most people. I took a 2-year program so I could get comfortable with being accountable. And it has a much different meaning to me than to most of my clients and the rest of the world because I did that. So the challenge I had in coming up with the process was identifying how to shift the experience people had of being accountable. And what I noticed was there's the concept of trust and alignment is often out of whack in organizations. And what that leads to is people always being on alert for when they cannot trust you. They're always racking up the evidence, right? And it actually starts when we hire people. Because the way most hiring goes is you interview somebody, and as part of the interview process, you identify, oh, this person has years of experience in that role. They're going to be amazing. And then you realize, you also have this other little job that you need done also, but it's important to you. So before you hire them, you say, hey, by the way, can you also fold the laundry for us? Now, they want the job. You want them to have the job. The job is an A job. They are an A player. You're sure of that. So why did you just give them a B job?
Yeah.
You have no idea if it's something that caters to their strengths. Are they any good at it? Or do they like doing it? What they're doing is they're saying, just give me the offer letter already. You're saying, no, I'm now going to have this new standard I'm going to hold you to. And they will begin disappointing you from day one. And guess what? Then they'll be a B player and they'll want to leave. What we do not do very well is we do not do a very good job of assessing where people are today. And then a week from now, where are they today? We don't do that. That's why I created this system, which is very simple and easy to implement and has a very easy meeting schedule with the questions that you can just ask without triggering people and wasting time and, blowing them out. Like, you actually have the ability to know, oh, these are the tasks that Jeff can do. He's really good at them. Oh, he keeps putting this one off over here. Maybe this is just not aligning with what his strengths are, what he likes doing. Because I guarantee you, Doug, when you have an employee who's doing a job that aligns with their strengths, that they're good at, and that they like doing, you don't have to worry about them leaving.
Yeah.
It's their dream job.
That keyword alignment. One of my other guests a few weeks ago, his name's Evan Burke. He was actually a football coach all the way up to the NFL for a number of years. And he said that was one of the key words that he learned to focus on was alignment. You want to create a vision for the team that you've got. And the critical part when it comes to talent is aligning people that are going to want to execute on your vision. And you make this alignment, and he said it can and often does include not just a skills assessment, but a heart assessment. Do you have the kind of heart that we want for our organization here? And in the case of the football, yeah, you can run a 100-yard dash in lightning fast speed, and you can catch a football while you're doing it. But if you don't have the right mindset or the heart for the job, you're not in alignment. So we don't need you. We're going to look elsewhere. And so he had a number of great examples of that. And I know it's a sports analogy, but it really fits. And we don't do enough of that in the average business today.
No, I would agree with that. I think what happens is people get hung up. And when they get hung up, there's a lot that gets missed. In fact, in a business context, there's definitely some things that you want to have in order to be able to be aligned. And I think what often happens is we miss those things. And the number one thing that matters is that you have, you've got whatever the vision that the leader has is, right? And then you've got a shared value system. And you've got to know the ability of your resources so that you can define whatever the actions are that are the priority actions. And when you've got all of those things, if you do not communicate them effectively, and by the way, everybody has a different definition of what effective communication is. And I'll share a little story with you about that in a minute. But if you don't align, communicate that effectively, then the outcome you're looking for may not show up. Because it's my assertion that most people would, if left out of check, what would happen is they would communicate from an emotional state and not necessarily from one where they thought about the outcome they want, because their communication is likely to be a lot different if they're thinking about the outcome and communicating from that. Because, Doug, ultimately, there's really only two states. You as a manager, rather, you as a boss are right. Leaders are not right. But bosses are right, and they know they're right. Or you can get what you want. This is where leadership lands, on the you can get what you want side. When you give up being right, and you don't tell me, I need you to fold the clothes 18 different folds in this different direction. It's got to be exactly, it's origami, right? Like, I will not perform for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you just say, hey, Jeff, can you fold the clothes so they're neat? I can do that. Right? But I think what just happens is people are not connected to what effective communication is. They're not connected to the thought process about having an effective outcome. I have this one client, just an amazing doctor. He created a whole science that is adjunct to acupuncture and has doctors that he's training to deliver on this science. And he's got a doctorate program that he just got approved at a university. It's amazing. But when I first started working with him a couple of years ago, he was losing doctors left and right and justifying it. Like he was right about it. And I said to him finally, I said, hey, dude, just tell me, is it really more important for you to be right? Or do you actually want to have a team of people delivering this medical technology to patients? Now, after I said that about 6 times, he called me one day and he said, hey, Jeff, I was about to go off on somebody. Instead, I thought I'd call you. I said, thank you. And ever since, I noticed he's gotten very effective at enrolling people to be on his team. And he gets, the communication is about the outcome and having this science heal people, not about being right, that it works a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is such a conundrum and such a common trait that comes out in a lot of our so-called business leaders. And I tell you on that note, Jeff, we're going to take a short commercial break and we're going to come right back. And I really want to lean into this idea of this communication thing. I've got some other thoughts and I'm sure you do as well. And we're going to be back right after this break.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to dougthorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to dougthorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's Doug, THORPE.com.
All right, everyone, we're back. And today I'm visiting with Jeff Cohen. We're talking about his book, Count Onable. And it is, we got, before the break, we were talking about the idea of communication being such a vital and critical aspect of good leadership. And he made the statement, and I do agree that, you know, communication is in the eye of the beholder, right? So there's a lot of different definitions. So Jeff, as you work with clients, how do you drive into that space and elevate that topic to the front of their mind on how critical that is?
You know, there's book learning, there's classroom learning, and there's in real life learning. And today, like reading about what effective communication is, that's great. I mean, I just listened to 5 Dysfunctions by Lencioni. Again, I love that book. By the way, just like EOS at the very end, they both say and press in on how important it is to be accountable, and almost to where it sounds like it's something you're forcing on people. And you just got to remember, like, people don't want to be forced into anything. So when you look at how people learn, I think there's some value in theory. But inaction is when it sinks in and it stands. I want to share a story about effective communication with you. And it's a personal story, not a business story, but I want to let you know that I honed this skill in my work environment. And so when my wife and I took our daughter, she's 1 year old at the time, it's our foster daughter, to visit with some friends for the weekend. And my wife and her friend went out. My friend and I took the 2 girls, his daughter's 7, mine was just 1 at the time. We took them in the wagon, and the 7-year-old is just there mommying the 1-year-old, who's super cute. And we get to dinner, finish dinner, hop back in the wagon, we're off to frozen yogurt. As we're pulling up to frozen yogurt, I turn my head and I noticed that my 1-year-old is standing up holding the edge of the wagon, and there are tears in her eyes coming down her face. I'm like, got my friend to stop, went and picked her up and comforted her, because she's scared to sit. She doesn't have it that sitting is safe at that age. So after I calmed her down and sat her down, I went over to the 7-year-old and I said, hey, honey, I'm just curious. Did you see that she was crying? She goes, yeah, I told you. Like, wow. So I said, huh. I said, hey, I have a favor I'd like to ask you. She goes, okay. I said, if something is going wrong and it involves her, and you say something to me, can you make sure that you hear me answer you back? And then she said the famous two words, Doug, I promise you've probably heard them 18 times today. Got it.
Yeah.
And then went right back down to her computer game and was moving her fingers and doing all kinds of stuff. And I sat there for a second and I looked at her and I said, hey, honey, I have a question. I'm just curious. What'd you get? And her finger stopped moving. And her head is still staring at the video game. And that went on for about 15 seconds. It seemed like an eternity. My friend was super patient, so grateful for that. And then she picked her head up and she said, you want to make sure that if I call for you, that you answer me and I hear you answer me. I said, yeah, I would be so grateful for you to do that. But here's the thing, Doug. About 6 weeks later, we went back and we were at a barbecue and she wanted to take my daughter to play with all of her girlfriends. And I said to her, I said, hey, honey, do you remember the thing I asked you when we were here last time in the wagon? And she said, where you want me to make sure that I hear you if I call out for you? Just imagine we actually had that kind of listening from everybody we talked to, and it stuck. Like, how could you actually get the words to stick?
Yeah.
And it's just simply because, you know, I call them respectful, straight conversations. That's really all they are. And where you can just simply say to someone, hey, I just want to check in. I want to make sure we're on the same page. What do you think I just said? And it's not like questioning their integrity or any of that. It's like, I want to make sure we're on the same page. And if we're not, that will tell it to you right then. Well, you know, I was thinking about picking my laundry up or folding the clothes or doing the dishes. When you were talking, I only got about half of it. Can you repeat that? Oh my God, I'm so grateful when someone fesses up like that instead of tries to make something up. There's nothing wrong, but there's this little Tasmanian devil, and he's bouncing off the inside of our heads, talking about stuff that we don't give a crap about all the time. And effective communication gets interrupted because of that. And then we have 5 leaders that report to the CEO, and they're all in sports cars, and one of them's going to Dallas, the other one's going to Albuquerque. Someone else is going to Chicago. And they're all going to get there really fast. It's just no one's supporting the other. And the number one team that they need to support is the team they're on with the CEO.
Yeah.
Because if that team is not aligned and the CEO expects an increase in sales, but they haven't got the budget figured out, and they don't have the candidates figured out, and they don't have the training figured out, how on earth are they going to get there?
Yeah. No, you're right on. That's such a critical aspect of it. And I was in a meeting earlier today before we got online here, and we were talking about partly about that. I'll be transparent. It was actually a group of coaches that all work together, and we support some large national brands and different things. And we were talking about that, like, how do you know when your client shows up for a session and is not there? You know, he's there, but not there, you know, one of those kind of moments. So we talked about some of the different methods of trying to pull it in and rein it in and engage and challenge the moment, you know, and it came down to things like, hey, Jeff, you know what? I'm sensing something here. You appear not to be yourself today. You know, is there something on your mind you'd like to talk about? And that's one little door you can open and say, do we need to go somewhere else? Do we need to think about something else? Do we need to reschedule our time? Because if it stays like this, it's not going to be productive. You know, so let's just call it what it is. And you go do what it is that's on the top of your mind, and I'll come back another day and we'll have this out. So but I think to your point, it's important to have that real and truthful conversation and to make it part of the communication.
Yeah, and like there's no charge in it. It's not like you're bad and you're wrong. It's that, hey, I'm just noticing that there's something that's not seeming to connect here today. There's nothing wrong. Is there anything that you want to say that would have you be clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just got in this really lousy argument with my wife, and I'm just totally stuck in that space right now. And you know what? Maybe then that's the opportunity to get them to be productive at work by letting them share about that and get clear from that and figure out an action there. Because listen, I'm a business coach, but I don't do business just for the business. I do it because I want to have a great life. And if you're a leader and you want to have a vacation where you're not working 2 to 4 hours a day, or someday you want to sell your company and you do not want a 5-year earnout, like you want all the money today, and so you could just walk, like you've got to create an environment where people are not penalized for saying, hey, I'm not good at that. I can't do that today. I'm stuck in a bad place. I need to go take the day off and get like, if you're unable or unwilling to give that grace to people, then you will always be the most important person in your company.
Right. Right.
And listen, if you want to sell your company, you better be not the most important person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So very true. Hey, I got to ask you one other question. I'm going to shift gears, and I'm going back reflecting on your own notes that you've published. So you mentioned being on Shark Tank with your granola bar business. You said in your notes that Kevin O'Leary himself, Mr. Wonderful, called you radioactive. What's that story?
Well, I kind of touched on it in the beginning. At least I gave you some background on it. So, when I went in and I was in front of all the sharks, the question about money came up, and I said, look, I had a business failure and I went bankrupt. And Kevin O'Leary just jumped on that the way, Kevin does. And he said, Jeff, you went bankrupt. You'll never have a bank. To me, you're radioactive. I'm out. And then Robert Herkovic, he stood up and he said, Kevin, that's just unfair. The measure of a man is not how many times he's fallen, but how many times he's gotten back up. The message to send here is Jeff's gotten back up. And, Kevin O'Leary in his, smug self was like, hey, he's dead to me already. Let's move on to the next deal, But the reality is that they didn't participate in any of my success. And before the show aired, we landed a deal with Safeway to launch in 3,000 stores nationally. So we did. They heard about it. So in season 2, we were the very first company they ever did a success story on. And we were not funded. And oh, by the way, Kevin O'Leary took credit for it by saying, that's why they call it Shark Tank and why I'm Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I had a neighbor in one of my when I had that company that I told about that failed after the crash or during the crash. When that company first got started in year 1, our next door neighbor was actually on Shark Tank, and she got funded. And sadly, the money and it was Barbara that came on board, because this was a fashion design company for what she called women with curves. It was really neat stuff that she did, really gorgeous and beautiful designs. And anyway, long story short, my neighbor lady, her husband ran off with the money.
Oh my gosh.
And Barbara still talks about it to this day. It was the worst deal she's ever done of any kind.
Oh my goodness.
And so, stuff
Wow.
happens, right?
That was an unexpected turn. Yes, for sure.
And I've actually heard Barbara on 2 or 3 other podcasts where the host has asked her, "What's the worst deal you ever did?" She goes straight to that one every time.
Well, everybody has one, right? That's awesome.
But anyway, well, I hate to kind of wrap the show on that note, but I think we need to. So, Jeff, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in the book or talking to you separately.
So first off, the book launched, and it was #1 in 3 categories on Amazon, like right away.
Awesome.
Not only that, but it was #3 when we had the push on. It was #3 in the overall category. #4 was Traction by Gino Wickman about EOS. And #5 was Andy Grove Books, the CEO of Intel. So we were in really good company. And I think anybody that's implementing Traction or looking at that definitely want to take a look at Count Honorable and figure out how those two can play together. And, the way people can reach me is I'm very easy. I'm out there, right? So first off, my website is countonable.com, COUNTONABLE.com. And there you can download all of the tools in the book for managing your business using the Count Honorable method. You can also download the first chapter. And there's a little button there if you want to have a conversation with me or someone on my team so we can get related to what your needs are. You can put yourself on our schedule. We'll be more than happy to meet you.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. And again, Jeff, thank you for sharing and being on the show, taking time. I think this is a real good one. I do want to remind everybody, if you're listening to us on audio, that there is a video version of this over on YouTube by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. And you can take a look at all the antics and fun stuff we've had doing this show and the flashing of the book as it's come up. But Jeff, again, one last time, thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here. I was really honored to have you invite me to be a guest on your show.
You're very welcome. So, folks, this is going to wrap up another episode, and I want to personally thank everybody for listening in and staying tuned. Just follow us on your favorite streaming channel, and we'll be back with another episode real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.